All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 33 of the Stop and Give Me 20 podcast, 20 minutes with some of the world's top fitness professionals. I'm your host, Anthony Renna. You can check out the show notes at stop20podcast.com. That's stop20podcast.com. Don't forget, go to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to the show. Leave us a rating and a review. Helps us out, helps us get the word out there. All right, for today's episode, I have on Brian Bradley, and Brian is the Vice President of Therapy Protocol for Egosque Incorporated. He's also Vice President for Patch Fitness. He speaks internationally on topics of posture, pain, and performance. He's had many high-profile clients, including Tony Robbins, who he travels with, and we're going to talk more about that later. He is the ultimate movement nerd. Brian, thanks for coming on today.
Coach, how are you, buddy?
I'm hanging in there, man. Let's get right into this. What's your story?
Well, I truly am the movement nerd. Being not too far away from 50 years old, that's why I put that in all my hashtags and stuff like that, just to give people an idea that you can talk about topics, but you got to be able to walk the talk. And the older I get, the better I get. I'm like a good wine, as long as it's really, really good Napa Valley wine.
So what was that early spark though? What's that, into your fitness lifestyle? How'd this all start?
I remember to the T, my brother and my dad, when I was probably about 14, building the weight set. I grew up back east in Pennsylvania, so, there's nothing to do in the middle of Pennsylvania in the winter if you didn't wrestle and stuff like that. So I was getting ready for wrestling season, post-football, all that. And they built the, I don't know if it was a Joe Weider weight set, where you had the little sand-filled plates and stuff like that. And I'd keep dropping them on the floor. He's like, in the kitchen chandelier would shake. He's like, knock it off. So, that was my first real step into it. It started with traditional weightlifting and staring at myself in the mirror going, I got to get this left arm to move like my right. I got to get my body. And I started asking questions like that, which never really were answered in the university level, how to get my body as balanced as possible, other than letting other people work on me. And, post all my sports and stuff, I ran into Egosque 26 years ago, and it answered the question of how to get the body balanced.
Nice. So those first days in the basement with the Joe Weider set, what were you doing? Just you and your brother and your dad? Were you guys did he give you a program? How did it work? And was it more for aesthetics at the time, or were you trying to get better as an athlete?
It was fully for aesthetics. Let's not kid ourselves. When you're at the middle school age and high school age, I've got to have bigger guns, more chicks will dig me, blah, 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 which we know is completely false. And it's no, my dad and my brother built this. My brother was a beyond scratch golfer. He had the course record for 30 years with a 62 with four over after the first three holes. So he didn't care really much about the golf fitness at that point, but he was also a basketball player, golfer, baseball player, all that. So you had that variety of sports back in the 80s and 90s, 70s and 80s. And then my dad would just say, here's your weight set. And he wished it was in the basement. That way it didn't sound like it was coming through the ceiling of the kitchen. So I would just basically lift, and nothing really taught you. There wasn't even like an illustration poster to work with that time. And then finally, me and my high school friends and I went to the gym, and we would start just playing around, and I would watch and learn of guys who really knew what they were doing. And then we started moving into the powerlifting stuff, which we learned at Penn State University during football camps.
Very cool. Very cool. Now let's talk about growing up. Who was your superhero? Who influenced you the most to become the person you are?
Honestly, I would have to say, everybody's going to say their dad and stuff like that. And I'd say there were probably three guys in my hometown who I ended up bartending later on at our country club and stuff like that. But there were guys that you grew up with, businessmen, who I distinctly remember one guy who my feet were basically slightly pigeon-toed like all great athletes. And you can put a smiley face after that one. And but most people walked with their feet out. So I actually tried it. I actually forced my feet to turn out and said, if I'm going to be successful, this is how neurotic I was about it. I'm going to have to turn my feet out and do this and this and this. And this was my best friend's dad, successful accountant, investor in town. And finally I just said, this is the most uncomfortable, odd thing that I've ever had to do in my life. So when I turned it back, I ran into my wrestling coach and I said, "Hey, coach, I understand why our feet are like this, during wrestling." He's like, and he flat out said, "Yeah, when your feet are turned out, it's wasted energy." And to me, that was a huge mentor moment, because our whole patch fitness idea is based on a lot of the same movements that we were incorporating in our wrestling season. The buddy carries like we did at World Golf, the wheelbarrows, the overs, the unders, hanging from a chin-up bar for a minute at a time with no pull-ups, just hanging there, letting the wrist, elbow, shoulder, and mid-back adjust to it. So, in the past, there were a lot of things like that. But I'd say my dad, my wrestling coach, and a couple business guys in town.
Very cool. Now, I said before, you travel with Tony Robbins. Pete Egosque is an inspiration. You have all these other superheroes in your life. Right now, who's your superhero? Who's doing some great things out there that you kind of really look up to?
Oh, I think there's some seriously cool people on the planet right now. But, I read a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which I'm telling you right now, everybody needs to read that book flat out. It was a recommendation by Tony Robbins, and I can't believe I hadn't read it in forever. The book is out since, way back in the day. He was an Auschwitz prisoner and came out of it. So, I like to hit up these mentors that I have, from a Pete Egosque to a Tony Robbins. And, he's a client of mine, but I've gotten to see that the 100 million people that he's touched with his Feeding America, with 250 million people now and 250,000 people a day getting water in India, those kind of dudes, they basically have FU money. And every once in a while, it's nice to be able to drop the FU out there and just say, I'm just going to do he's a force for good. Same thing with Egosque. It's about giving away the material. A guy who's created such a huge method and forced the paradigm to shift into postural dysfunction. We talked about it over 25 years ago, and he said, I'm done asking. I'm just going to force feed this, and people are going to get on board or they're going to get run over. That kind of mentality is missed a lot of times because the politically correctness around the world. And I just got done with a big Tony Robbins thing up in Canada, and we got to hear Bill Clinton speak. He's 25 feet away from me, and last year was George Bush Jr. And these guys truly are amazing. One of these events will be Obama. And whatever, forget the politics behind what these guys stand for, but they're truly mentors if you listen to the message that they truly can get across. If you just bias with your subjective opinion, you're going to miss the whole objective measurement of what they're talking about. So, one of my main mentors is Egosque, Tony Robbins. Those guys are kicking ass. And I can tell you another one is I'm a huge fan of Dave Asprey with Bulletproof Coffee, because the guy is he's experimenting on himself. And then he's just disseminating information. He's not coming across as this is the only way or the highway.
Love it. Great answer. And I think, I like the way you put Bush and Clinton in there. Like you said, you're listening to the message, not whether the political affiliation. I love it. Bri, with your message, who are you trying to reach? Who are you trying to be a superhero to?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I'll be honest with you. I just started social media about 6 months ago, and my goal was to beat my son in followers, which I'm now just kicking his ass. And but we laugh because of a lot of the narcissism that's on there. I came out of a meeting the other day with 4 or 5 people in the city of Chicago, and I said one of my main goals is to shift what's on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. I'm done with these people just taking pictures with their shirts off. In fact, what I'm going to start doing is just taking their pictures and superimposing my face on it going, look how great I am. But it's we got to get better as a society, and we got to start. You asked me about my mentors and who I look up to. Think about my son and his friends who are 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, and they go on Instagram and they see these guys that are, oh, look how big, look how strong, look how this. There's no compelling message there other than I have to like what I see in the mirror. So as much as women are told, look a certain way, or you're not going to be accepted by society, the dudes are just as bad. And if you think about it, Anthony, every time that we get up in the morning, first thing we do before we get in the shower is look in the mirror like, okay, how's the 50-year-old body doing today? But there can't be criticism behind that. It's just a simple question. And what are you doing today to be healthy? And one of my big things that I'm passionate about is really putting out good messages. And I like to add my stupid comedy to it, but that's why we posted something yesterday about those organic carrots on Instagram, and people are like, wow, so colorful. And I said, yeah, like Lucky Charms cereal, and it's it is a joke because you can't even compare the organic carrot to the cereal, but Lucky Charms cereal takes a lot of us back to our past, and they are delicious, but we're going to pay for it when we eat it.
Absolutely. And you're doing a great job with that. I know, like you said, I think we had you on the Strength Coach podcast right when you were starting, your social media, and you've really kind of really honed in a good message. So good stuff. Bri, you were telling me earlier that you've been like reading like a madman. So I want to kind of shift into some books that you've been reading, and tell us about some books that you really want to tell others about right now.
Number one would be the 80-20 principle. If you haven't read it, it's essential reading. 80% of your success is created by 20% of the stuff you should be focusing on. You don't have to focus on the other 80% that actually only produces 20% of your results. And I hope that I actually got that ratio correct. But that's a great book. The other one is The Four Agreements. Just recommended by Bill Clinton the other day on stage, like I said, up in Canada. Just a really cool understanding of how you view the world and your attitude that you're taking toward every situation that comes to you, which I think is a very important thing for our youth. And what you guys are doing and the experts that you have on the show, and I don't consider myself one of the experts. I just have a very sick sense of humor. But these guys, they have an opportunity to really push something like that, to get these kids to look at, instead of reading books just to read books, get them into books that are going to make them better men, better women. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl is an absolute must. Just from the idea of being forced, you're at a crossroads during any decision, during any downtime in your life. You can either go left or go right. Is cancer a death sentence, or is cancer a gift? And I'm not talking about The Secret and all that kind of stuff, because I read that a long time ago. I'm really talking about your internal discussion with yourself, saying, for me, for example, are my clients' chronic pains, are they death sentences? Are they permanent and unstable for the rest of their life? And our first job is to get them to shift by asking questions and then sitting back and listening. And it truly is, you got to listen to get better at that. And there's another book called GTD, Getting Things Done. My good friend Mark Acosta-Rubio, who would be unbelievable as an interview for you. It would be unbelievable. I'll get you his contact information. His story is very compelling. But he gives me a lot of good information. Again, another business and personal mentor of mine. Back and forth, we share a lot of information. And these books are, once you pick up a book, if you can get through the first 3 chapters and say, this is unbelievable to where it would be worth reading again, then it's a book to continue with. If you have to get excited and create the excitement, put the book down and pick up something else. And the last book, other than, of course, Pain Free by Pete Egosque, I'm not just plugging it, but I just read it again not too long ago, and I just keep thinking to myself, unbelievable. That's why we're not rewriting it. Unbelievable book. But the last book is The Bulletproof Diet. I can't tell you enough that how it's going to literally turn, and has turned, the complete belief system on diet upside down.
All right, love it. A good, well-rounded choice there. A little bit of kind of mindset stuff, and kind of some things about with the 4 agreements being some things that you should do, and getting shit done, or getting things done, I should say.
Oh no, that would be a great book. Getting Shit Done will probably be the next edition. Yeah.
Yeah, the 80-20 is interesting. I told you I bought Unshakable, which is another one that I think I actually bought 5 of them because all the money is going to charity, and I sent 4 to 4 young strength coaches who I felt like really need to read that book and understand, because like he was talking about, just not, millennials aren't investing. They're really nervous about investing, and kind of led me into some other Tony Robbins stuff. But, just talking about getting the right things done, like you said, with the 80-20 principle. So great recommendations. Love it.
I can't push the Unshakable book enough, just from the donation standpoint, but I just paid my son $100 to read it. You're going to read this book. Here's $100. And then he thought it was easy until I said, we're going to have a discussion right after you're done. And he's going to start investing now, because it is a game changer.
Nice. And, I got to say, the podcast, I've listened to episode 1, but it is a great compliment to reading it. So I put a note in everybody's when I mailed it out to him, like, make sure you listen to the podcast too, because it is a great compliment, and make sure you follow some of this stuff. So it's important. All All right, Brian, now it's time for the stop and give me 5 segment, 5 rapid fire questions and answers. You ready for this?
I was born ready, bro.
You are not born for rapid fire anything. You got to remember, we're a 20-minute podcast.
That's right.
Brian, you've been all over the world. What's your favorite place to kind of travel to?
Oh boy, home is always better to travel to. But if I had to go to somewhere else, 2 places, probably the Czech Republic and Japan. The Czech Republic, from a scenery standpoint, you'd never see anything more beautiful than just the architecture. We went over there to share information with Karl Levitt and Pavel Kolaj in regards to their deep stabilizing system and how Egosque, and we got that referral by working on Vladimir Yanda for 3 years. He made the referral and said we needed to go over there years ago. And the second one is Japan. If you haven't, forget the scenery for a second, just go and hang out with the people. They're just badass.
Love it. Coolest moment traveling with Tony Robbins?
Life Mastery back in the 90s in Hawaii. My sister, I got her to do the 7-day event of Life Mastery, which, there were 3,000 people and we're up on stage doing stuff. So she got to see her brother in action, which was fun. But I watched her overcome some serious mind roadblocks and heart roadblocks, emotional roadblocks. And I watched her climb a 50-foot telephone pole and jump to a trapeze at the top. And of course, she didn't understand physics at that time because she was so scared standing on a 5-inch platform and she's afraid of heights. But she truly understood the link between the physical and the emotional at that point. So that was probably my fondest memory as it relates to traveling with Robbins.
Wow. Craziest moment. You're on stage in front of so many people. What was the craziest moment just being on stage in front of that many people?
Yeah, in a week and a half, I have another 10,000 people up in LA. And honestly, it's like people ask me about it all the time. And I joke with them and I said, well, listen, I was speaking to John Bon Jovi the other day and they're like, what? I'm like, no, I'm just kidding you. I said, but that's what it's like being on stage. Can you imagine how addictive it is for a rock star to be out there and people just idolize them? It's different for me. I walk out and you can literally make eye contact with anybody in any stadium, but you really energetically can feel it. And I always look for one person in the top 20 rows, left, right, straight ahead. And I try to really make eye contact with them, let them know that I see them, I'm present with them. And my last event was a 9-year-old girl, and I pulled her up on stage and did the Running Man, the greatest abdominal exercise ever. I had her lead it at 9 years old, and I was calling the San Jose SAP stadium up there. I kept calling the people out, 11,000 people. If you can't do what this 9-year-old's doing, you're pathetic right now. And they all laugh at that kind of stuff. But that was a fun little moment. And her dad contacted me after and said completely changed her life to where she says she wants to be on stage now. So that's kind of fun.
Nice. This is an interesting one. I love this question. If you could have been in any movie, what would it have been in?
Oh, that's simple. There's actually 3, but I'll give you just really one would be the movie Taken. The second would be Man on Fire. And the third one would probably be John Wick. And I would be the ass kicker in all of them.
Nice. Love it. Lunch with anyone from the past. Who is it?
Probably my dad's dad. I'd just love to know more about him. He was a captain or something like that in the Pittsburgh police force. And I'd like to know what it was like really raising my dad in a city where he was such a great athlete. He was basically the fastest white kid in the city. All his friends were black. And so we, of course, growing up in Pennsylvania in that household, we never grew up with any racism. We didn't even know what it was. And I think it was a great way to learn how, in my mind, just the equality that we have as human beings, and no matter skin color, belief systems, religion, it just didn't exist in our life. So I thought that was a huge lesson passed down from his dad, who I never got to meet because he passed away before we died. But I should probably be on a couch talking to a shrink about this the more that I think about it.
Very cool. Brian, I normally talk to somebody about a project that they're working on, but you and I were talking earlier, and I want to get this in, spend a minute on this, some things that you're doing, why you're reading so much all of a sudden with some of the ingredients that you're using in your cooking. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I post a lot of stuff. As you see, I'm probably annoying people because I'm supposed to be the posture guy and talking about pain. But I can tell you, I believe fuel in is fuel out. And that doesn't mean just physically. I'm talking about mentally. I've probably read 10 books cover to cover in my life, and probably less than that. That includes university, because I was not a person who could comprehend chapters at a time. I don't know whether it was ADHD or just flat out stupidity. I just attributed it to that maybe my elevator doesn't go to the top floor, but I knew I was smarter than that. And the minute I started cooking with saturated fat, grass-fed, grass-finished butter, the minute I started having, whether it was cacao chocolate or mold-free coffee or just plain hot water with maybe yerba mate tea with 2 tablespoons of grass-fed butter, 2 tablespoons of MCT, medium chain triglycerides, putting those in my drinks with collagen protein, not whey protein. And it made a huge difference, dude. I'm literally on to probably 14 books, probably now within the last 6 months, and 2 in the last month. And I just can't even understand how this brain fog has been lifted. But, we work a lot with some NFL teams, and we're flat out turning them into bulletproof teams nutritionally, because you think about a coach staring in front of a screen all day long, assessing player film and having brain fog. He's missing stuff. And I'm sorry, but at that level, you can't miss stuff. It's just, it should not be allowed. So we're in the midst of, and I know just about enough about nutrition to be dangerous, where John Berardi would freak out because he's the expert in it. But for me, there are some very simple hacks you can do. And one of them is, and John would agree with this, just put some healthy fats in your body, because this low fat, eat chicken for every meal and increase your mercury content by only eating fish is just flat out stupid.
Love it. More information on that is in the Bulletproof Diet book?
Absolutely. But I mean, you can literally go, just get onto YouTube and listen, take Dave Asprey for what it's worth. The guy's an experimenter. He's not just in his mind, he'll probably tell you he's not an expert. He's an experimenter on himself. He's trying to hack his way to live to 180 years old. I don't know whether he's going to do it. I'll be right there with him. But that's because I'll be on a ventilator and they'll just be keeping me alive somewhere else. But ideally, it's about playing around with things and not just taking things as rules, and finding out how your body works with these the best way. And I can't tell you, I've had so many people make just small shifts in this morning drink as their breakfast, and doing a little bit of intermittent fasting, and then increasing it with that huge amount of green vegetables and a huge amount of just quality fats, whether it's from meat or vegetables, but just really pounding the omega-3s and stuff. And I'll just give you one little idea to think about. The anti-inflammatory aspects of that are unbelievable. And then the anti-cancer CLAs, you got to look at how the body is basically producing a protective mechanism against what we call a decrease in our immune system. And yes, getting your body into the right alignment, I'll flat out tell you, is critical. And Tony Robbins would tell you that he would not be able to perform the way he does without the hacks that he's doing every day. And one of them is doing his Egosque every day, and the other one is cleaning up what's going into his system. And the guy's a machine, 100 million people, 15 hours a day on stage sometimes.
Absolutely. Great stuff. We got 30 seconds for the letter to your younger self.
Oh, boy. You're going to laugh at this one, but shut up. I mean, seriously, I know I have a lot of information and I am so passionate about it, but at some point you have to become the listener. And here's a great thing to think about. The person listening is the person that's in charge of the conversation, because you're really listening for driving points, where to take the conversation. The person that's just sitting there talking is trying to fill dead space. So when I'm with a customer in chronic pain, I ask them a question and then I sit back and I just wait for the dead silence to become uncomfortable, and then I just wait longer. And I flat out sometimes tell them, I'll sit here all day till you understand that you have to be part of you getting well.
Love it. Well, I hope you don't shut up with your message, because you're doing some really great stuff, and I'm glad you finally made it to social media. So we really appreciate you coming on the show. So Brian, thanks so much for coming on.
You're the man, brother. You don't realize how much good you're putting out there with the stuff you're doing.
I really appreciate it. All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 33 of the Stop and Give Me 20 podcast. Thanks again to Brian Bradley. Make sure to check out all the links to all his stuff at stop20podcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave us a review and a rating. My name's Anthony Renna. Thanks so much for stopping by.